This is a Film Stories original podcast.
All new drinks are now at McDonald's. With refreshers like the Strawberry Watermelon Refresher and the Mango Pineapple Refresher with popping boba. To crafted sodas like the Sprite Berry Blast with berry flavors and cold foam. Who knew ice cold drinks could be so fire? Try them all now at McDonald's.
Refreshers contain caffeine. Copyright 2026, The Coca-Cola Company. Sprite is a registered trademark of The Coca-Cola Company.
Welcome to the Japan on Film podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and today I am joined by a new guest, and that is Jim Cannon. Jim, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very good. I'm excited to talk with you about this. I love the show that you and Justin do, but instead of having me talk about that, why don't you tell people a little bit about that show and a little bit more about yourself?
I co-host a show called The Iron Age of Comics, which our catchphrase is we're a critical reevaluation of comics from about 1985 to 2000, mostly American comics, although we're starting to branch out into some British stuff. We don't do manga yet, but I think probably we'll hit that at some point. I mean, Akira looms large across many genres and mediums. So yeah, we're just a couple of guys who talk about comics, try to look at things as a not so much as necessarily as fans, but as critical reviewers. We take things apart and try to find out how they work, how they fit into their respective genres. We don't just do superhero stuff. We do lots of comics within that period, although admittedly we do focus on superhero stuff a lot.
Okay, yeah, it's a great show. I discovered it actually by chance. I was I'd gone to I had this little bug in my ear about early 90s like grim and gritty comics, like the kind of like extreme image stuff, and I had wondered, I'm like, I wonder if anyone had gone back and started looking at those through like a modern lens, just kind of seeing like how those comics have aged, poorly or otherwise, and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't find that, but I did find your show instead, which was a very nice surprise, because you and Justin, I as listeners may or may not know, I'm a huge comic book fan. I host a superhero show of my own, which Justin has been on, both to talk about a movie and a comic book. And and I love your guys' takes on it, even when there's stuff that is when your takes are completely out of left field compared to my takes. Like, for example, Planetary. Like, I love Planetary, and that was something that you were not such a fan of. But listening to you, go through it and evaluate it, I can really kind of understand where you guys are both coming from with that.
I think,
and you also sorry, go ahead.
For me, Planetary was a lot of potential that lacked execution, so I was unhappy with it. But I mean, I can see why people love it for sure. I want to love it.
Well, you could listen to we've actually done a few episodes on the Planetary series, and we have one more to go on the fourth book. So yeah, so you could check those out over on our show, and you could see the other side of the coin on that. But it and also you guys opened my eyes to some other stuff that I didn't really think a whole lot before, like Squadron Supreme, which I had read, but I didn't really, put a whole lot of stock into it. But that episode you guys did on it was, very enlightening about like, and I realized when you were going through that, I'm like, oh my God, they're right. There is like a lot. It was kind of like having a conversation with Watchmen in a certain sense. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that came out of that. Yeah. And because I'm a little bit younger than you, so I came in during this period, whereas you and Justin, you started off a little bit earlier than me. So we've got these perspectives that are very close because we were both reading at the same time, but also slightly askew because of just the different positions that we were in time. It's interesting to get that perspective, because usually when I hear a lot of older fans talk about that era, it's usually just completely dismissive and just like, oh, the stuff that came from the Bronze Age was far superior. But you guys, you lay out stuff and you find, really good stuff that's interesting, and you've made me want to check out stuff that I haven't seen read before, like the Kyle Rayner Green Lantern and things of that nature.
Thank you. It's good stuff. Yeah, we try. We try.
But anyway, and the reason, so we are not a comic book podcast, but the reason
No.
why I wanted you on this show is actually because you guys were covering some of the Star Wars comics, and during your conversation, you had mentioned that you were a big fan of The Hidden Fortress, which is the topic
Yes.
of today's movie. The famous Kurosawa film from 1958, Japanese title is Kakushi Toride no Sanakunin, which literally translates to the three villains of the Hidden Fortress. English title just cut the three villains part off of it. And I think what this movie is most famous for these days is not so much the movie itself, but the fact that it was George Lucas's inspiration for the first Star Wars movie, especially the idea of kind of starting the story out with 3PO and R2D2,
Yep.
and the idea of telling this epic story, but from the perspective of the two lowest characters in the movie, in the story, so to speak. And you had mentioned that you were a big fan of this movie and in that Star Wars discussion, so that got me the bug in the ear, like, you know what, I've never seen The Hidden Fortress before. It's always one of those movies that's been on my list that I've wanted to check out. And hearing you say that, I'm like, okay, well, this is a good opportunity. I want to talk to Jim anyway about all this kind of stuff. So this is a good way to kind of like get me in and start chatting with him. So let's see what we can do. And we were able to set that up. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk a little bit about your history with The Hidden Fortress or Japanese cinema in general, or Kurosawa, or anything of that nature.
So I have to admit to be a little trepidatious about guesting on your show because I'm not a film guy. I had a film guy period, and that was my 20s. That's when I watched Kurosawa movies. And I think I've seen maybe one or two movies in the theater in the last year. when there was a time in my life where I was either going to the movies every weekend or renting something every weekend, and that time was long ago. But as far as Japanese films go, I'm of the generation where Godzilla movies were on TV every weekend. So that was my introduction to Japanese cinema. Kaiju, or Dai Kaiju, I think is actually the technical term. That's the kind of Godzilla guy I am. Even though that the word has been shortened to just generically Kaiju, which I think just means
pretty
monster.
much in Japan as well. Yeah, it just means monster. So yeah, you're
but
technically
it used to be
right.
giant monster, right? Dai
Right,
Kaiju is
yeah.
giant monster. So
Yeah, but it's been shortened both in the West and in Japan to just kind of like kaiju is
which is a
catch-all
shame
term.
because I like precision, Perry. I really do. That's a joke. So my 20s though, like I said, I was watching a lot of movies. My friend Jeff, who was really more of a cinephile than even I was, had a membership, a card at a place that rented movies. This is back in the before times, long before streaming was possible, when you had to actually go to a building somewhere in your town or the next town over to get a movie off a shelf and and bring it home. And this place, Pleasant Street Video in Northampton, Massachusetts. It was one part independent theater, so they showed films on two screens. And I actually saw Clerks there one night, and Kevin Smith showed up. I think I talked about that at some point on my show.
Oh, cool.
And but the rental place had lots of art films and independent films and such like. And my friend Jeff said we're going to start watching Kurosawa films. And my exposure to those was primarily through like Magnificent Seven and Fistful of Dollars and Star Wars. So actually seeing the source material really opened my eyes. And love Seven Samurai. I love Yojimbo. Watching Hidden Fortress was quite a revelation because I was also a big Star Wars guy, and seeing how much of Star Wars is taken from that film really, really surprising. Like even the wipes, like the scene shifts that Kurosawa uses, where the right side of the screen will slide left rather than just a quick cut to a new scene. Like there's a transition. Like Lucas took that directly, um, not just plot points or story structure. It was amazing. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Actually haven't revisited it since then. I own a couple of other Kurosawa films, but I had to get Hidden Fortress from my local library, which again is something you can do in this day and age.
Yeah, my introduction to Kurosawa, like many people, my of my generation is I came in through mostly like horror movies and that sort of stuff that
Mm,
became popular around the early 2000s. But Seven Samurai might have been the first Japanese movie I saw because I had my first exposure to it was actually in the Crow graphic novel because there's one scene where he's doing all these kind of like dances and like these movements, and then he says to his cat, he's like, "Have you ever seen Seven Samurai?" And that line always stuck in
ah,
my head. I'm like, what is this? What is this Seven Samurai? And I looked it up eventually and found out it was this movie, and then found it at, again, back in the before times when you had to go to a video store, I found it at my local Blockbuster and on VHS too, right? So this is like this massive two tape
right.
set.
Big clamshell box.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There was like two clamshells that were like rubber banded together or something like that. Um, so I watched it, and famously it's a very long movie, like 3+ hours, but it's
hmm
so engrossing and it moves at a really good pace. And so that was
hmm
my first introduction to him. And then it was in my university days when I really started diving into Japanese cinema. And I was taking an international film class, and one of the movies that was there that we watched was Rashomon. And so that one also kind of blew me away. And after
Right.
that, I found Yojimbo on Criterion, and I picked up that. And most people, like you said, they got exposed to this stuff through like Magnificent Seven or uh, A Fistful of Dollars. But for me, it was the opposite. I got exposed to the Japanese ones first, and then later I watched Magnificent Seven and Fistful of Dollars. And so Hidden Fortress is the only one where I was actually exposed to it. Like most people, I was exposed to it through Star Wars, and then later only recently saw the Hidden Fortress.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I had a great time with it. It was a lot of fun. And to your point, you were saying about how similar it is to Star Wars. Like reading over the descriptions over the years, my whole thought process was kind of like, oh, well, the very basic premise, the whole idea of these two, you know,
Yep.
lowly characters, getting embroiled in this larger conflict. That's probably the only thing that's taken from it. But I was watching it last night,
No.
and I'm like, oh my, no. Like the whole scene when they're walking around there, when Tahe and Matashichi are in the beginning, and they're having this like argument out in the open field. I'm like, oh my god, this is basically Tatooine and the argument
Yeah,
3PO and R2 are coming down to.
exactly.
I think some of the dialogue is almost lifted verbatim.
And then when I'm I'm gonna mangle the names. I apologize. Matasuichi, when he gets press ganged by the Yamana soldiers, and then we cut to Tahe. He gets nabbed, and then they run into each other, and they have that joyous reunion, just like R2 and 3PO on the Jawa crawler. Like it's the
Right,
exact
yes.
same thing. It's it baffled me that it was this close. That like actual scenes were taken whole cloth. And I mean, we can get into the parallels later. I think
Mhm.
Hidden Fortress is a film that stands on its own merits as an enjoyable romp, comedy, adventure story. And it has some really amazing performances. I mean, Toshiro Mifune, I obviously one of
Mhm.
the greatest actors that's ever lived. But even and I've got to double check. Um, what was her name?
Oh, Misa Uehara, who played Yuki.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is like her first movie, I think. And she does such a fantastic job with a very difficult role because she is the focus of the whole film. She's the whole purpose is
Mhm.
to get her safe out of the enemy territory, and she has to hide who she is. But then like the whole conclusion pivots on her revelation during a key scene during the fire festival.
Mhm.
And she doesn't have to carry the film because, like you said, that the two peasants are our eyes and the way that we experience the movie, and then we have this totally awesome badass hero warrior running around
Mhm.
who does this amazing stuff. um and he's the quote unquote hero, but man, I have completely lost my train of thought.
Well, I wanted to pick up on what you were saying there about Misa Uehara, because yeah, she had a very short acting career. This was her first film, 1958, but then
Yeah.
she was only in movies up until 1960, and then
Wow.
after 1960 she retired to go raise a family, and just never, and then eventually she passed away in 2003, it looks like. But yeah, she just came in. She made Hidden Fortress, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, like about 9 films, if I'm counting
Wow.
correctly here. And that was it, and then she was done. And yeah, you know what, the thing that really struck me about her, well, I'll dive into this later, but you'd said this was kind of your first time watching this movie since that
Yep.
original, exposure. So what were some of your thoughts when you were rewatching it to prepare for this?
Well, I think I will. Well, I didn't remember a lot of the film. There are certain scenes that stuck with me. When Adasichi and Tahe overlook the cliff and see the fortress. That is like a clear memory, and some of the other bits and pieces. Like I had completely forgotten the fire festival, for example. I had completely forgotten um, the spear duel, but I do remember Tadakoro's face turn at the end because that was so unexpected. Um, but knowing that was coming this time, I was watching, not really expecting anything, but just like watching. Like there's that scene in the interrogation when Tadakoro comes into the room where um uh Princess Yuki and the maid, who never gets a name, and Rokurota are tied up, and Yuki gives the speech about how her eyes have been opened to the lives of people, and the fire festival has really changed her, and she sings the song from the fire festival. And there's this really subtle move that ah, Susumu Fujita, who plays Tadakoro, makes,
Yeah.
where it's all body language, and the way that his shoulders move and his head turns kind of foreshadows that face turn. And it's but it's a widescreen shot because it's shot in Toho scope. Um, I think this was the first widescreen film that Kurosawa made. Is that correct?
Oh, I'm not sure. That's a good question.
I that's I what
Very might be. Very
my
well might be.
my
Yeah.
brief research beforehand that seemed to say that. But so the focus is on Princess Yuki as she's doing this. So Tadakoro is in shadow. We see him from behind. We don't see the expression on his face or anything. So it's all body language. It's really cool. And then the next day, when they're about to be led off back into Yamana territory, he sets them free, and so it's so good. And because of the Star Wars thing, because I was expecting this Darth Vader character to act like Darth Vader, it was such a surprise the first time I saw it. And this time I was kind of expecting it, and I really appreciated how much Rokurota and Tadakoro respect and admire one another. There is a rivalry, but it is like when they're during the interrogation, Rokurota says something like, "We're enemies, but also true friends," which that's such an amazing thing to say. Um, And I think that really defines that relationship, and it's very interesting to me. And so there's like that kind of stuff, but also there's the two clowns and how
Mhm.
um they're constantly scheming, and every scheme either gets the party out of trouble or into more trouble. It's really
Mhm.
amazing. So it's like the first time I saw it, it was just like along for the ride, and it still feels a little longer than it needs to be. But there's the comedic scenes are so good, and the world that they inhabit is so real. Um, like for example, when they have penetrated into Hayakawa territory, is that am I saying that correctly? Um,
Um,
and
yeah, I think so.
they have the cart filled with all the gold that's hidden in branches, and they stumble across the fire festival. The pilgrims heading to the fire festival, and the peasants decide, oh, we'll move in with them and we'll hide among them because it's a whole purloined letter situation. But they don't think of how they're going to get themselves out of that situation. Like
Mhm.
they're all that wood is going to the fire festival to be all the other peasants and people they're carrying wood on their back to go burn all that stuff. So they but then there's a scene cut and you see Yamada troops saying we're looking for these people with a cart full of wood. We think they might be trying to get into the fire festival. And I love that the plot doesn't allow like the villains get setbacks and they make mistakes and they're tricked and everything, but they're not dumb. Like they're aware of what could happen and they're trying to take steps to get their prey, at the same time. It's no one is a complete well, so some of our main characters are idiots, but like nobody like there's no like idiot plot going on.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you know,
Or no
when
no inverse ninja law type thing or anything like that
yeah,
where like with that's one of the things that always, taking it back to Star Wars, where, Obi-Wan says, only stormtroopers can be so precise, and then when they're actually shooting at the main characters, they can't hit a barn door to save their lives.
yeah. Yeah. But I mean, here when Okaroda rides into the enemy camp to try to like by accident, and then that's how he has his first altercation with Tadakoro. He like intimidates everybody through sheer awesomeness. So it's not like they like everyone's afraid to bother him. It's not like stormtroopers are just bad shots or these guys are bad shots. They're terrified of what a badass this guy is. Um, he's got a huge reputation. It's not like I mean there are definitely huge differences between Star Wars and Hidden Fortress, and I think that the similarities are frankly amazing. And I as I said in our episode where we talked about the Dark Empire comics, and I said anybody who is a Star Wars fan should see Hidden Fortress. Um, I don't think Hidden Fortress fans need to see Star Wars, but um,
I imagine most probably have, but yeah,
yeah, well, it's hard to escape.
but yeah, you know what? So this is my first time watching it, like I said, and to your point, to the point you made about it being a little bit longer than it needs to, I did feel that too, especially in the first half. I think
Yeah,
when we're very much focused on Taihei and Matashichi, I wasn't as invested in their antics. I felt like we could have clipped some of that out and trimmed it down a little bit. But once you got the quartet together and they're going into the town and everything like that, that was when I really started getting more invested. I really started to pay more attention to it. I thought that was when it really started to get more interesting for me. And I think it ironically enough, when it got away from the start, when it's the stuff that Lucas didn't really focus so much on, that's the stuff that I found a lot more interesting. And maybe it's just because I'm so familiar with Star Wars, maybe it's a subconscious thing, but for whatever reason, I started to get really clue into that. And I think also a big part of it is Yuki and her character growth that she starts going through when they're in that town that it really started to interest me a lot more.
Yeah, the stakes are much higher once they leave the fortress. But and then yeah, Yuki gets her big hero moment in the village when she witnesses um the innkeeper abusing one of her citizens and like trying to force the young woman into a life of prostitution,
Right. Yeah.
and Yuki demands that Rokuroda buys this woman and frees her, and he's like, we can't. we're in so much danger. This is ridiculous. We can't do it. And she insists, and to her credit, she insists, and to his credit, he gives in to her. And again, that's like kind of like doing that save, and then another villager buys one of their horses, so they can't they don't have enough horses to carry all the wood that they have where all the gold is hidden. So then they have to change plans then, and that helps them escape another net
Yeah,
going
I
forward.
found
But yeah, I think
I found that part interesting when the horses bought, because I mean it seemed like it was not presented as a choice they could make. They couldn't
oh
say
no,
no,
yeah, it was
and I
not.
couldn't
Yeah,
really figure out why that was. I'm not sure if I missed something with that, or if they just maybe
I
just didn't want to avoid suspicion.
I think partly that, and partly because they are disguising themselves as peasants, and the guy who buys the horse is dressed much more richly. He's wearing nice robes. I
Right, to
assume
the
he's some kind of
whole feudal type of
aristocrat.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and there's some kind of like, yeah, they
The
do not
rules
have
of
the option to
social
say no to
hierarchy,
this
yeah.
guy.
Hmm.
I mean, they do because they're royalty themselves, but they're disguised. So they can't, they have no, without revealing themselves, they kind of have to go along with it. But that, like I said, that ends up helping them in the short term. Um, but yeah, I think once they leave the fortress, the stakes are much higher, in
Hmm.
part because she's with Madasichi and Tahe do not know that Yuki is the princess, or that Okuroda is the general. They think
Hmm.
they're just common criminals like them, peasants like themselves, and that they're all going to share equally in this gold that they have. So the peasants are constantly scheming, and in fact, initially they're trying to get away, like steal as much of the gold for themselves and cut out their partners completely. And
Right.
and there's a couple of really uncomfortable scenes and a lot of dialogue that suggests that the peasants are quite willing to rape Yuki,
Yeah.
because she's just a girl to them. And yeah, it's interesting how this film treats women. Um, but like I said, one of the main characters doesn't even get a name. And
Hmm.
she's just a maid. Even though once she finds out who Yuki actually is, and is not only loyal because of feudal ties, I presume, but also
Hmm.
because this woman saved her from a life of sexual enslavement. That she is quite willing to die for them, and she even gets shot later in the film, and trying to help them. It doesn't get a name. That still bothers me.
It does,
um,
yeah. Yeah, so it's
but
she's played by Toshiko Higuchi as the actress, and on Wikipedia, the credit is literally a woman purchased by the group who chooses to accompany them. That's her credit
yeah,
title.
yeah, yeah. And then in contrast, Yuki herself um is is not period appropriate. I would say, she's described by her handmaiden as not an heir because she's
Hmm.
not a son. Um, but she was raised as a son by her father, so she's kind of a tomboy, and she's much more assertive and aggressive than a woman of her age and station would be during
Hmm.
this time, which I think makes her more acceptable as a protagonist in a film in 1958, I presume. Um, so that's interesting.
Yeah, something that's interesting about that too is because I clocked the treatment of women in this, and some of it is just, appropriate to the period it was made in. So the fact that this type of indentured servitude was very common in the feudal society when
Yeah.
you would the a daughter or would be sold to a brothel owner or something like that, or an innkeeper, and usually or a geisha house even, and they would have to. The whole idea is you'd be expected to work off your debt, which usually you don't aren't able to. Although there were some instances of, especially like certain very popular prostitutes who were able to buy their freedom and pay off their debts. But usually what would happen is you would find a wealthy patron who took a liking to you, and then he would basically buy off your debt and in some cases marry you, but in some cases just keep you as his mistress. So that was kind of like the most common ways out, though, were usually, you know, just work until you're dead. Die from like botched abortion procedures was also very
Mm.
common, unfortunately, back then. Um, or if you were lucky enough to find a wealthy patron, then you'd get bought out. And then every very rarely now and then you'd have a situation where a woman would be able to work off her debt herself. Also situations where a woman might be adopted as like the next madam of the house. That happened sometimes as well.
Hmm.
And so then she would, when she grew older, she would then take over the business type of thing. But in the case of this, like, two interesting things I thought. Well, first off, she's also been called the farmer's daughter on Wikipedia, so probably easier to refer
Mm.
to her that way. Um, she is refusing to go along with that deal
Yeah.
to begin with, and then you have Yuki here, and one of the things that I've noticed as I watch a lot of Kurosawa movies is that the treatment of women is not that great. So I was really kind of pleasantly surprised to see how Yuki was really assertive in this, and how strong of a character she really was. Because I think this is probably the strongest female character Kurosawa has ever had in any of his movies.
Wow.
But anyway, we're gonna take a. Sorry, do you want to say something about that first?
No, I was going to just say I wish I could argue with you, but I don't have a breadth of knowledge of his work, unfortunately, to provide
Yeah, it's just
counterexamples.
no. It is just. I mean, like, I'm sure there are probably some counterexamples, and I'm sure there's some Kurosawa aficionado who's listening to this episode and is screaming in their car or whatever. But but I really do think that this we've talked about this in several Kurosawa movies we've covered, that the female characters tend to be very marginalized in a lot of his movies. I
Hmm.
think the biggest exception I could probably think is in maybe High and Low to a little extent, and also in Ikiru, with the young woman who, kind of like is who is working along with the old guy in that. But those are kind of like the only two exceptions, and even still I don't think either of them is as strong as Yuki is here.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and then you might listen to some ads, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss more about this.
This summer, serve up the Cookout Classics, Heinz Ketchup, and Kraft Singles. Every good burger needs a layer of perfectly melty cheese and thick, rich ketchup. We all know it's not a cookout without Heinz and Kraft.
Are your ad campaigns lighting up the dashboard, but not the pipeline? That's bullspend, and marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
My boss asked for results, so I opened my dashboard for the only positive-sounding metric I had: impressions.
Cut the bull spend. See revenue, not just reach. LinkedIn delivers the highest return on ad spend of major ad networks. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
And we're back. Another thing about Yuki, and you talked about this as you mentioned this about her kind of like change in demeanor, her change in worldview, due to the fire festival, due to what she sees with the farmer's daughter, and also that rape scene you'd mentioned too, that, or attempted rape, I guess we could call it. That also stood out to me.
Suggestion.
Yeah, suggestion. And that really stood out to me as well in not the best way. But what I did like about that is that here we have the farmer's daughter there, and she just starts whacking the shit out of them.
Yeah, and she grabs a big rock and she's about to huck it at them.
Mhm.
And I mean, these are our point of view characters. These are the guys we're supposed to be sympathetic to, but they're cowardly, they're pathetic, they're greedy, they're whiny, they're really unsympathetic. They're like the very worst that the farmers class has to offer. And but there are our main characters, and we still kind of like them because I think we can still kind of identify with on some level their desperation, and being forced into situations that they have no control over, and trying to find ways to not only survive but profit from them. And then there's some other things they do, like I said, like when they're eyeing Yuki while she's asleep, really uncomfortable. Suddenly we don't like these guys so much.
Yeah, and she seems to be holding that rock for a long time too, because there's some cuts in there that
Yes,
suggest like a pretty long passage of time, and she's still there with that rock, just holding it there.
that's why I think she's great. She's a great character, and I don't, like the fact she doesn't have a name. Still, I keep coming back to that, but it's a bizarre creative choice. But I think um maybe speaks to the anonymity of women of that class of that period,
Mhm.
and the kind of she's obviously heroic. She's obviously a good person. And I don't think the film thinks badly of her. She does get to go free at the end. She joins them, and like I think another great hero moment. Like because they're aristocrats, Yuki and Rokuruta are on horseback at the end when they're about to be sent back to Yamada, and oh god, when Tadakoro frees them, they just wheel their horses around and ride away. But Rokuroda like grabs the maid, pulls her up, and throws her on his horse.
Mhm.
She's not forgotten. She's still protected, and that's cool.
Yeah, especially since he was the one who was arguing against, buying her
Right.
freedom in the first place.
Yeah, I think her taking a bullet for them was a big deal to him.
Hmm.
I mean, he's that whole warrior thing.
Right.
Um,
And that also, and yeah, that ties back to Tadakuro too. And I think one of the things you were talking about with his turn at the end and how that respect he and Rokurota have for each other, is also kind of interesting because I think that might have been seen as something as unusual in a lot of films of this time. Like nowadays, we look at it and there's almost an expectation that the hero and the villain have a begrudging expect, right? We've seen it happen so many times in things like, X-Men, or in Star Wars too, with Obi-Wan and Vader to some extent. But back then I think it was kind of a new thing to see something like that. So I think that's probably another influence we can credit from this film on stuff that came later.
and I think too, it was probably more common in that the period in which this story is set, that this kind of um there's not a hatred between these two men. Like they are soldiers first, and they serve their lords, but they have no personal enmity. And because they are both accomplished at what they do, they kind of respect one another just based on that. And then they have that totally insane duel. And I think that kind of cements that respect, and it kind of sets up this burgeoning friendship that follows through at the end. I like watching the fight scene, and obviously it's obviously choreographed, it's obviously shot for film and everything, but it does not feel cinematic the way that fight scenes do in most movies. It feels um more like a realistic duel.
Hmm.
There's a lot of Well, first of all, and I watched this with my son, who really enjoyed it. He thought it was very funny. He liked the clowns a lot. Um, but he when Tadakoro challenged Rokurota to a duel, he he says like the spears are all garbage, but pick whichever one you want. So he Rokurota goes through again intimidating everybody just like looking at him. He tests a couple of spears, finds them all like Tadakoro said garbage, throws a bunch of them away, and then settles on one. So that's a cool. And then when they start the duel, they don't start fighting right away. There's a lot of posturing, there's a lot of feinting, there's a lot of like looking the other guy in the face to see what is he really made of, what is he going to do, what is he going to try, and then it kind of goes into the actual fight, which ranges all around not only this practice field but in through this is the cinematic part when they're fighting over chairs and like tent tent trappings and stuff, which is looks cool but probably goofy. Somebody would trip and get killed if it was a real fight. But it felt it felt very real to me in a way that like a Marvel movie or even a Star Wars movie does not, because it's so stylized, and this wasn't. But I think that's where they kind of go from being like, oh, I've heard of you and I know you're an honorable man and a good soldier, to by the end they're like Roku really can say we're true friends because they've been through something. And Todokoro is upset because Rokurota did not kill him at the end of that duel. And I think that's an act of mercy that is both strategic and just an act of respect, because having fought this guy and he feels he understands him more. But also, if he had killed Tadakoro, he wouldn't have made it out of that camp alive. The other 30 guys there would have just ganged up on him and killed him. But just the shock of seeing this battle and then having this guy ride away, I think saved Rokurota's life in that moment. And then at the end too.
Right, because he comes back in and he helps them out in the end as well, and he helps. But also too, there are a few different ways you can read that. But before I jump into that, this is gonna funny connection. But when you were talking about the idea that there is no personal enmity between them, it's just it reminded me of, and I can't take full credit this. One of my guests on Superhero Cinephiles drew this comparison. But do you know the Ralph Wolf and Sam Sheepdog cartoons?
Yes, of course.
So for anyone who has no clue what I'm talking about, it's this the sheepdog and this wolf, and the beginning of each episode, they're like, or the beginning of each cartoon, they're kind of like talking, they're going into work and they're clocking in, they're drinking their coffee and they go their separate ways. And as soon as the buzzer starts, then they have to be enemies because the wolf is trying to get the sheep and the sheepdog has to fight off the wolf. And then when the timer buzzes again, then they stop whatever they're doing. They're all casual again, and they clock out together, and they're just having a nice friendly chat. I think there was an episode or an issue of Batman Black and White that parodied something like that with Batman and Joker. It was kind of the same type of thing. And so I get kind of that sense here with Tadakoro and Rokurota, like you were saying, where it's just this idea. It's like we're just these guys doing a job. Like we don't actually have anything against each other. Actually, I think you're doing a pretty good job with what you're doing.
Yeah, there's I think, like I said, I think this is more common in that period. So the Three Musketeers, the original novels, the D'Artagnan, who's the main character, and Rochefort, who's the guy with the eye patch, they're enemies throughout the first book. But at the end, when everything is over and the situation has resolved itself, there's like an epilogue that Dumas provides where D'Artagnan and Rochefort have become friends. So I think there's because they're working for opposite sides, but there's it's not like the way that modern media portrays everything, where everything is a life or death struggle, and you have to have feelings about the antagonist that you're paired up against. It's more just like they're in the way,
Hmm.
and it's their job to be in the way, and your job is to be in their way, and when things are over, you never know what's going to happen. The lords that you serve may may come to some kind of peaceful agreement or alliance, and suddenly you're working with these guys. So you can't you can't let things get personal.
Hmm.
Um, the way that I think modern fiction wants, or the well that modern fiction usually goes to, um, for a modern audience, because that's what we expect.
Right. The whole I call it the Batman phenomenon, where in '89 where they had to make the Joker the one who killed Batman's parents.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You've got to make it personal. Like, it's not enough
Mhm.
that the the bad guy is a bad guy. The good guy has to have some personal grudge against them for some reason in order
Right.
to do the right thing. Or like Man of Steel, where Superman learns not to kill by killing. I you
Yeah,
know
the
uh yeah. So I find that I think that's an interesting layer to this film, and I think, to go back to the Star Wars thing, I think in the original draft of Star Wars, Darth Vader was just an old acquaintance of Obi-Wan Kenobi. He was not Luke Skywalker's father. I think that came later.
No, I'm pretty sure that was not planned at all. And there's a lot of stuff that like Lucas always said that he had planned this whole thing out, but you look at it and there are holes big enough to drive a truck through when you when you're really
Yeah,
paying attention to some of the
and I
continuity here.
and I know the original draft of of the Star Wars followed the Hidden Fortress even more closely, plot point by plot point. But so I think, like, Darth Vader is, and I think, like, if I remember correctly, Alec Guinness was told that, like, this is the scene where you die, and he's like, oh, okay. Like, I don't think Obi-Wan Kenobi died originally on the Death Star. I think he made it
Oh,
to
that's
the
interesting.
end,
Um,
originally.
but also what's interesting, and I wonder how much of that had to do with just the fact that Alec Guinness really did not like being in that
Right.
movie.
Yeah.
And maybe Lucas just decided let's just kill him off then. And but then they still brought him back as a ghost anyway.
Or the
But
story
also
was
oh,
constantly
sorry.
evolving, I think, and I think there there were like 5 or 6 drafts of that script. I've read a few of them online, again, many years ago, but, like, originally it was the Wookiees flying the X-wings to destroy the Death Star, for example.
Oh, okay, interesting.
It was a whole, like, reverse Ewok situation, um, where the planet that they land on that's going to get blown up is the Wookiee planet, and they train them to fly X-wings, and it's really goofy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But also apparently that Mifune, here is a Star Wars connection that links it back to this film, is that Mifune was the choice to play Obi-Wan in Star Wars,
Sure.
but according to Mifune's daughter, he turned down the role because he felt it would cheapen the image of samurai.
That's awesome. I know,
Yeah.
he made one American film, and his English was never very good, and I think he did all of his lines phonetically.
Yeah, Red Sun.
That
He was in
th-
that.
and that may have soured him on the whole notion as well of doing a an
He was also
American.
in I believe he was also in there was another one. It was a World War II movie, I think. But I thought that was maybe I'm getting it mixed because I know Kurosawa was supposed to direct it, but oh, he was also in Shogun. So he
Mm,
was in that. So he's in the original Shogun, not obviously.
right. What did he do all of his lines in Japanese,
I
or
don't know, but it does say he played Lord Yoshi Toranaga.
hmm,
So I'm
interesting.
not sure if I because I've never seen that original. I haven't even seen the original
Neither have
Akira
I. I
Kurosawa.
was much too young.
But Okay, so here we'll hear something about that. Mifune said the original script had his character speaking modern Japanese, and he corrected the anachronisms so it'd be more appropriate to historical Japanese of that time. Um, See, I'm guessing that he probably spoke Japanese the entire time
Yeah.
then.
Gosh, he's so great.
Yeah.
Everything I learned, every little bit I learned more about Mifune just makes me more impressed. I
Uh,
corrected the Japanese to make it more. That's awesome.
but yeah, and when obviously you can see the influence that Yuki had on Princess Leia, clearly in
Yep.
that, even to the point that, the fact that she's a princess doesn't even really make much sense in Star Wars, but here it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. Yeah, and the whole tomboy thing too.
Hmm.
Um, Definitely. They're basically the same person for sure. Even like the so the very end of the film, Dahe and God, I'm
Madasichi.
so Madasichi. That is a tricky name, and I've got to
It
ask you
is,
about
yeah.
the. Let's put a pin in that because I got to ask you about the names in a minute. But at the very end, when they are captured, and imprisoned, and they think they're going to be executed for trying to steal all the gold, they're
Mm.
instead brought before Yuki, Tadakoro, and Rokurota,
Mm.
and they're rewarded. And the framing of it is exactly the medal ceremony at the end of Star Wars,
I
like
clocked
the
that too, yeah.
triumvirate, and they're rewarded. And Rokurota's in full samurai armor gear. It's all black, the black lamellar armor with the swooping helmet. And again, he looks like Darth Vader. Like,
Yeah, that's actually modeled on a real samurai's armor. That was the armor famously worn by a samurai by the name of Date Masamune, and that was the visual inspiration for Vader. And so yeah, he was wearing when I that stood out to me as well because I've talked about I've done some lectures here in Japan about similar cross-cultural influences between American and Japanese films. And one of
mhm.
the things I talk about is how Date Masamune's armor was very influential to the basic look of Darth Vader's suit.
Yeah. So okay, so the names. So I am not conversant enough with um Japanese nomenclature or geography, but typing up my notes for this recording, um the spell check has no problem with any of the actors' names. Those are all just fine. But all of the character names get the little red underlines. So I'm just curious if they are like old timey spellings, or are they some kind of like fantasy version of Japanese regular names,
No, I
or
think there
what?
was
Like,
there were different styles of naming conventions back then, I believe. I'm not an expert on
okay,
this, but and so these are like a lot of names that aren't used anymore, right? It's
okay,
so and so like Rokurota is his first name. For Tadokoro, Hyoe is his first name, and those are names. And I've taught hundreds of Japanese students here in my almost 20 years now living here. Not
wow,
once have I ever seen, and this is true of a lot of these movies that are set during like the Edo period or the feudal times. Like I've almost never see a lot of these names pop up, at least for the men. Like on the women's side, that's a different case because Yuki is a very common woman's name nowadays. So there are a lot of I noticed there are a lot women's names tend to be a lot more timeless, I guess, whereas the men's
okay,
names tend to be a lot more old fashioned, and you don't really see them used at all anymore.
interesting. Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just yeah, they're just I think it's just like, and I think that is the case because again, strange way to learn this, but I use for my writing, I use a website called Fantasy Name Generators, and they have
Sure.
generators for almost any type of name you could use. And for when it comes to Japanese names, they have two generators. They have one for like Edo style names. They have one for modern names. So I think that was the
Okay.
case.
All right. Cool.
Yeah, so it's really interesting in that aspect. Um, also the other thing I wanted to talk about too was just how the Kurosawa, I feel like one of the things he's doing here, and I've seen these types of themes pop up in a lot of his other movies, like Seven Samurai has this, the whole idea of the samurai and the farmer's daughter in that. High and Low, obviously, you have the whole idea of class differences with the rich doctor and the poor criminal, and I'm seeing a lot of that here, like this kind of like criticism of social hierarchy. And I think that really comes into play. And I think that maybe that's why that second part of the movie really stood out to me a lot more, was Yuki's change and her kind of acknowledgement that these kind of like social hierarchies are really kind of stupid.
Yeah, but at the same time, the conclusion kind of reinforces them. Like everything is back to normal, quote unquote normal at the end, with the aristocrats in their lofty perch and the peasants back to being poor. Although they do get a reward of 10 Rio, I think. And
Right. 1 Rio, actually.
One and the formerly greedy peasants are suddenly like willing to share or say, no, you keep it, kind of thing. So I think there is a critique of some of the social roles, but I think there's also an embrace of them for the most part. Like in a more I guess traditional film, or at least a Western style film, there would have been a romance between Yuki and Rokurota, but that is like not even mentioned as a possibility in the film, because she's a princess and he's a general. They are different social classes. Even though he's higher than the peasants, he's still lower than she is. And in fact, he has to sacrifice his own sister to help preserve Yuki's life. And as a sidebar, again, back to that subtle acting thing that Fujita was doing. Mifune, same thing. Like when he learns of his sister's death, you can see him repress a lot of emotion that the two thieves do not pick up on because they're completely clueless. But it's just that kind of like very impressive. But yeah, I think there's more a critique of the feudal system and the social conventions that create this inequality, that create this war, that create this instability, and for which people have to suffer and die for. Because I think that's kind of like the Fire Festival, I think, is that, are they reciting some I don't again, I did look this up. I think it is Buddhist, but I'm not entirely 100% certain. But the idea of the temporality of a lifespan of a human being, or because it's 1958, we're talking about the life of a man, and then comparing it to the life of an insect, throw them both in the fire. They're both temporary. And I guess on the extended timeline, they're both worth about the same. And I think that is kind of the conclusion that Yuki comes to. And that's what kind of her speech and her singing of the song that saves her life ultimately. I think if the film is talking about anything, I think that is what it's saying. I'm not sure it's necessarily, because as topsy-turvy and uncertain as everything is through the middle of the film, I think by the end, all is right again, and the aristocrats are in their palace and the peasants are kicked out down the steps. So I don't know how strongly I agree with that.
No, that's a fair reading, and I think, and there are one of two ways to look at it. One is I could be completely off base, which is definitely possible. The other way, though, is that maybe it's just this kind of idea of Kurosawa just maybe kind of playing with the idea a little bit,
Yeah,
because again, and I go back to Seven Samurai, because in Seven Samurai they did also have a similar thing, because there is that whole romance between the young samurai and the farmer's
that's true.
daughter, but by the end of the movie, they're back, like you said, they're back in their own social classes. Right, he goes off with the other samurai, and then she's back singing and planting rice in the field and all that. And then this too, which was made only a few years after Seven Samurai, has the same type of idea. But then you look at something like, and maybe it's just that he was just trying to introduce some of these ideas, or maybe it's he was becoming more comfortable with the idea of criticizing these things. Because I think by the time you get to stuff like Yojimbo to a certain extent, or
Mm,
you get to, especially when you get to High and Low, that
yeah.
kind of like criticism of social hierarchy, I think becomes a lot stronger in those later movies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah, for sure. I think that's in Yojimbo. Yeah. Okay. I think you're onto something.
So,
But again, I'm not the film guy. You know better than I do, in all honesty.
but no, it's a fair critique of that idea though, and you're right, they do, because they do end up putting things back, and everything goes back to normal by the end, so to speak. And we don't know how much Yuki's character change will actually stick through now, because I think the fact that she only rewards them with a single yo on the condition that they share it is
Yeah.
it struck me as, a little bit condescending. I mean, these guys, yeah, they were, they're bumbling idiots and they caused a lot of problems, but they also helped you get to where you are now. So I think maybe you could have at least given them each their own yo.
It was their plan that allowed them to
Mhm.
escape, which that was good. Yeah. Um, I mean, they do make the point that the clan needs all that money to rebuild its fortunes, so they can't really spare a lot. That's the most they can give them. But yeah, I agree. They each could have gotten gotten one.
But also it could also be seen, because the farmer's daughter, right? She's presumably part of this new clan restoration thing too. So it could also be viewed as, a pseudo punishment for all the times you guys did screw up. So it's like, look, we want to thank you, but also you did cause a
But
lot of
not that
problems too,
much.
and you did try to rape me as well. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, I there's a lot of times where Rokurota was ready to kill the both of
mhm.
them.
And not without reason. Let's be
No,
honest.
yeah,
but
absolutely.
that that is also a bit of the, also when you look at the how he saves the farmer's daughter at the end, he pulls her onto the horse, uh which is a contrast from how he had originally just said, like, oh, we can't afford to buy her. And
Yeah.
the whole idea of, like, his whole plan was originally, let's just kill these two peasants, their lives don't mean anything. And then he's like, well, wait a minute, these guys seem like they might have a way to help us out. So I there is, and it's, if there is a class critique there, I do agree with you that it's probably half baked at best. And I think, and I did see this kind of criticism in some of the reactions when I was reading up about, was a lot of critics were saying that with this movie, it's not like on the same level as like Seven Samurai
Mm.
or Yojimbo in terms of uh thematic depth. And I think there is something to that. It does feel a lot more of Kurosawa is just more of like his, his more something that he was making more for the mainstream, as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, and I think I mean, it's more fun. It's more
Mhm.
silly. Um, because of these two clown characters who kind of dominate the narrative. And they're bumbling. Um, they're near escapes. I know when they uh, at the end when the Yamana troops close in on them, and um Matasushi and Tahe escape hiding behind bushes or like holding up branches. My son laughed out loud at that. So like, I mean, it's you as great as Seven Samurai and Yojimbo and so on and are. I don't laugh very often at those movies.
No,
So it's
yeah,
like
definitely not.
this is the very different tone for sure.
Yeah, it reminds me of that exchange in Jane Silent Bob Strike Back, when Ben Affleck is trying to teach Matt Damon about the rules of acting. He's like, you do the safe picture, then you do the art picture. I feel like maybe that's something like what Kurosawa was doing here.
Yeah, and like I said, I think this was the first widescreen film he ever did, and shortly after this, he started distributing his own films, I think, or something like that. I think he broke away from the studios.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, you were right about that. This was the first his first film in widescreen, and he had a lot of frustration. The studio had a lot of frustration with him because he was shooting at a very slow pace, and so then that's why he formed his own production company.
Okay.
But he was continued to have distribution deals through Toho, though.
Okay, I misremembered that, but I knew there was something. So yeah, maybe you're right. This is the money picture, and he'll do a more personal one later. Yeah.
And so then that we're running low on time, so I just wanted to quickly talk a little bit about there was a remake of this, as we mentioned. Have you seen this remake? It's called Hidden Fortress: The Last Princess.
No, I learned about it just doing research on this film, and I thought, what an odd decision to remake this movie, but I guess they remake everything. So
yeah, it's interesting because it looks like it's more focused on Rokurota and Yuki as the protagonists here, and I'm just going by the description here because it's more focused on them, and it says that as they're disguising themselves as humble firewood peddlers, that's when they end up coming into contact with here they're different names, Takezo and Shinpachi. And so it looks like it's maybe a different perspective as opposed to the original. It looks like it did get a pretty positive reaction at an early screening at the University of Southern California, and it was also screened at Cannes in 2008. It doesn't say what response it got to that, but I was checking on Letterboxd, and the reviews don't look very positive. I think most people are just kind of comparing it negatively to the original.
Yeah,
although I will say, yeah, I will say though, it is directed by Shinji Higuchi, who directed, he's part of Neon Genesis Evangelion. He directed the remake of Sinking of Japan, directed the live action Attack on Titans films, and also with Hideko Anno, he directed Shin Godzilla, and I think also Shin Ultraman was also, Hideaki Anno also co-directed that. So Shin Godzilla and Shin Ultraman, he directed both of those, or co-directed them. So I'm curious about it, if only because I did like Sinking of Japan. I love Shin Godzilla. I haven't seen Shin Ultraman or Attack on Titan, but those, just based on the strength of those two movies, I am curious to check out his remake of Hidden Fortress.
Might be worth a look.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, I think that's a good note to end on. So Jim, thanks so much for coming on, and
thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
You. It was, yes, definitely enjoyed it. But why don't you tell people where they can find you?
So we're the Iron Age of Comics. You can find us on anywhere you get your podcasts, and on all the socials. We're at Iron Age of Comics. Justin runs all that stuff. He's a hero. Engaging with the public on that level. I'm the idea guy. I just talk stuff about people in tights.
And do a great job. So yeah, we'll have links to that stuff, your social media and the podcast in the show notes. So please make sure to check that out. As for us, JapanOnFilm.com is the website, JapanOnFilm.com on Blue Sky, and Japan on Film on any other socials that are out there, but pretty much just Blue Sky is where I'm at most these days. Also, we are part of the Film Stories Podcast Network, so please make sure to check them out at filmstories.co.uk and listen up after the credits to hear about any other shows that you might be interested on the network. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
The Japan on Film podcast is produced by me, Perry Constantine, in conjunction with the Film Stories Podcast Network. Visit JapanOnFilm.com for show notes, episodes, and information about being a guest yourself. You can also reach out to me on the website's contact form if you have questions or comments about Japanese movies or the show itself. The show is at Japan on Film on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram, so please be sure to follow us. If you'd like to support the show, you can donate on JapanOnFilm.com, purchase from our advertisers, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Film Stories Podcast Network Discord from the link in the show notes to connect with me and many other cinema fans and podcasters.